In a recent podcast episode, I talked about your 256 square foot tiny house. A lot of subscribers have written in about how to get started on their small farm or homestead, and they want to have kind of a cabin space set up or some kind of just a building to feel like they're getting something started or accomplished. And so what I'm going to talk with you today is we're going to go a little bit beyond that initial program, and we're going to talk about how to write out the designs. Now, I know this kind of is a visual thing, but I'm going to describe it to you in a way that's going to help you get started. And I almost want you to just take out a piece of blank paper while we're talking about this, and that way you can start designing your tiny house. Hey, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. And one of the things that we want to make sure you're able to do is very quickly get either a working space, a studio, a cabin that you can spend the night on your property so that you can have really start getting things going. Now, a lot of folks have written in and they say, look, my property's in the next state over. My property is takes a little while to get to, and I'd like to spend the weekend there, but I'm not sure how to get started. Now, it's a big mistake just to have a shed dropped off at your property and convert a shed into a tiny house. One of the problems with a shed conversion or a barn dominium or repurposing something is the moisture content. You could have moisture issues. You can have issues with rot and other things. You can have issues with a building inspector. There's a lot of problems you can have. Now, with that said, there are shed companies where you can have a shell dropped on the property that is housing specific. So you have to contact the shed company and you have to ask them about can we build based on building codes. And that means they're going to house wrap it. That means they're going to insulate it differently. That means they could possibly set it up for wiring and stuff like that. So we're not going to worry about building the outer shell of our structure. Now, to stay within 256 square feet, we're doing that for two reasons. Number one, it's a small square footage that you can finish off in a weekend. Okay, you don't have to worry about getting it started, and a lot of people fear this is they get it started, and then 6 years later they still haven't done anything. They're not done with it, and now they have a great camp out, family camp area, but they still haven't built their main house. They still haven't got their gardens up. We don't want the initial frontier-like cabin to distract from the bigger picture, the bigger plan. Another thing that I don't want to have happen for you is that you build a cabin or a temporary structure that's so good that you never go any further. So again, 256 square feet tends to not require an inspection for most counties. You have to look that up yourself. But if it's a non-permanent structure, like a tiny house, and that's why I'm using the tiny house language, then you can just pick the structure up and go someplace else. Now, the structure that we're designing here is not going to sit on a trailer. It's going to be on cinder blocks or piers or what. It depends on your area, because it is a little bit heavy. It's made out of wood. It's got kitchen in it. It's got a bathroom in it. It's got the basics. Now, it does not have black water. So you would use a human manure toilet or a composting toilet in this kind of building. Now, why would we do that? First off, if you've put black water in a permanent or impermanent structure, you can run a risk of a lot of problems because you're not likely to have a septic at your location. Now, there are really good above ground septics. There are really good ways of processing black water, but a lot of your building inspectors and zoning people are not going to understand that. They're going to come in and you're going to have a problem, and so that's just going to be a distraction. Another factor here is that it's not going to be obvious that you've got living quarters there because you might stay for extended periods of time. You might live in a house like this, but ultimately you don't want to have to get a residential permit. Now, I'm not offering you any legal advice here. We're essentially building a cabin in the woods, and we're doing it in the fastest way possible so that you can focus on your larger design plan, which is your small farm or homestead. And this is perfect for somebody that, again, it's got to drive into town and they're going to spend a week there and they're going to work on different things. They might be cutting down trees. They might be, putting out garden plots. They might be building fences, and you just need a safe and secure space to live in. And then when you're not there, you're probably going to store your tools in it so that nobody steals your stuff. One of the things about this kind of shelter is that you do need electricity and or gas. So we want to have hot water in one of these shelters because we're going to be cooking and kind of living out of the space for 14 days, weekends, depending on the climate, could be months. So that's why I look specifically at the Alaskan cabins, the Swedish cabins. There's a lot of different cabin structures that are pretty common to be vacation homes, hunting cabins, that kind of thing. So it doesn't matter to me whether you put drywall on the walls or you put plywood on the walls or you put some kind of different paneling on the walls, because it would be more location specific or whether your area can handle that. But because the outer shell of your building is airtight and the outer shell of your building is properly vented, you can use this kind of design with a lot of flexibility. Now, some people say, well, why don't I just get a travel trailer? And I say, well, yeah, sure, go ahead. Get a travel trailer. The only difference between a travel trailer and this kind of structure is that this kind of structure you could use a closed cell insulation, and you can get a higher level of insulation for the place. Plus, with a travel trailer, you can't let a travel trailer sit in one space for a long time. The way I envision these studios or these small, tiny houses is that once you get your main house built, the kid is going to use this for like a getaway spot, or you might Airbnb it, or you might otherwise still use the building, or you'll sell the building off. But a travel trailer, you're probably going to get like 5 years of heavy use out of it. Maybe 10 years if it's weekend or transitional use. But this type of cabin that we're designing here, and we're going to go through the design steps, probably for $50 to $75 a square foot, can be kind of a non-permanent yet long-lasting and durable structure. So what we're talking about here is a shed shell or a pole barn shell, but not connected to the ground. Meaning the entire structure can be picked up and moved. That means you need 2x6 in the foundation. And so I always say, a barn or something, because they bring those in on specialized equipment or a roll-off, so you can easily do it. Now, could you do this with a container? Yeah, sure, you could do this with a container, but a container is only 8 feet wide. The structures that we're talking about here are 12 feet wide, 16 feet wide. They could be 20 foot long. They could be 18 feet long. It really just depends on your needs. They are house wrapped and then closed cell foam in the walls. That way you can get a decent insulation level, but you don't have moisture trapped behind the walls that cause the walls to rot. A lot of these sheds either have metal siding or the sheds will have some kind of engineered wood siding. And if you get water behind those things, they'll rust out and there'll be a problem. I prefer to put these on a pillar or some kind of so you're not on a foundation, but you're high enough off the ground that somebody can get up underneath there to put in additional insulation, vapor barriers, and then you have either gravel or some kind of rock base underneath so that you get airflow, and then you can skirt the building. Because one of the key things about this design is that you want all your plumbing and your electrical components enclosed in the structure, so there's nothing hanging off the structure, so that if you do have to move the structure, somebody can come in with a roll-off, or they can come in with the specialized equipment that will pick up the shed and move it to wherever you need to move it. Now, this is very important because when it gets moved, you want everything to stay functional, because these things are going to twist, they're going to turn. You want to make sure it stays functional. So again, that's why we go with the shed body. That means there are no tiles inside this space. We're using engineered flooring. We're using vinyl flooring. Because, again, as things stretch and move, a floating floor is not going to buckle all up, and then the vinyl is not going to stretch, or, there's different kinds of vinyl these days, by the way. This isn't the old kitchen vinyl that you had in the past, but essentially your kitchen and bathroom space has a faux tile flooring or a floating floor or something that can be easily mopped out. And then your main studio space or your shared office space has some kind of could be a wooden floor, but if it buckles or changes, you just tap it back down. It's not a big deal. Or it could be a floating synthetic floor or something like that. Now again, a lot of folks don't want to use synthetics in their space. They don't want to use plastics. That's fine. You could have a plywood floor. The key is that if you do move the structure, that you can easily screw things back down, or that everything's been glued in place. Now, a lot of shed companies will not put down, so they'll use an engineered floor, and what you probably need to put over top of that is a glued down 3/4 inch plywood or subfloor. That's really up to you, but again, we want the structure to be somewhat stiff, but if it does twist and turn, it's not cracking drywall, it's not cracking tiles that you've put in. So for example, for the shower, it's better to get a 36-inch shower stall that's self-sealed than it is to go ahead and tile in a place and put it in a basin and stuff like that. So what components are in these tiny houses? First off, there's a micro kitchen. There's some kind of bathroom space, which would be a shower and a sink. Again, we're using composting toilets. We're using dry toilets. So your toilet space would just be a 4x4 square where you're going to put down your compost toilet or your dry toilet. You're going to have some kind of pantry, but probably basic cabinet space. And then you're going to have a few burners and a sink to do dishes. The way this design works best is if you put all of those things near the front door. Because remember, we're going to be working at this location. And so when you come in the front door, you've got tiles or some kind of floor that you don't mind getting messed up. Okay. Now, again, these aren't cemented in tiles necessarily, unless you can really get that floor stiff. But you're going to come in the front door, strip down, walk in the shower, take a shower, throw your clothes back out on the front porch, and then get your lunch going, get your dinner going, get your meal going, and then sleep. So you want to be thinking about like Tokyo-style apartment or New York studio apartment where you have a transitional space from the front door to the living space that is meant to be messy. So in a traditional Japanese house, you're going to come in the front door and there's going to be what's called a ginkan, which is very often a dirt floor. And you will come in there and, cook, clean, shower, whatever. But when you move into your studio space or the rest of the house, you're going to take off your shoes and transition. Now, these spaces can have lofts. If you're going to do a loft, don't necessarily have to have the shed company build your loft for you. You're better off having whoever builds out the inside of your cabin to put the loft in, because you're going to want 2x6 a floor there. Because what we're going to do is we're going to insulate under the loft and over top of the loft, and so we now have the loft over our kitchen or our bathroom areas, and it gives us space to run the piping. Because remember, all of our water is going to be inside the space. All of our drains are going to be inside the space. So if you're able to have a loft over top of the kitchen, you can run your gas lines, you can run your water lines all in the loft, under the loft, and then you don't have to run them under the floors where they could possibly freeze in the future. The only thing that you'd have under the floor is like a 2-inch drain pipe that would connect to. So again, if we're only got gray water, your drain pipes have to connect to some kind of reed bed or some kind of drain field so that you can drain off that gray water. Now, in another program, we can talk about the gray water side. There are very easy ways to manage gray water. You can send it to a fruit orchard. You can send the gray water into different types of sumps. You can even use a small tank to ferment out the gray water and make biogas. That's for another story. When it comes to the space, again, we're transitioning from our main entrance through our kitchen, through our bathroom. Those areas would have the pantry and such, and then ultimately going into the studio itself. Now, because we want a rigid structure, we're not going to have a whole lot of windows in this space. You're usually going to have one window in the back, and then you're going to have a door with some windows in it. Or you could have a door and 2 windows up front, and then in the back, you just have a giant window on one side or both sides. But be thinking about that. When you put in a lot of windows, you reduce your insulation factor. And also, since the wall is only like 20 feet long and the building's only 12 feet wide, it's not a lot of space to put windows. So you want to be thinking about electrical outlets as well as DC powered lighting. Now, you can do this whole space on DC power because we're borrowing appliances and concepts from an RV. So you're going to use a smaller stove. You're going to use a smaller sink. The shower, I like to have that a full-size shower because I'm a regular-sized guy. But again, it's going to be a 4-foot shower stall or 3-foot shower stall rather than like a bathtub and stuff like that. And you want to be thinking about pocket doors. Inside your space, you're going to have the minimum number of doors. So if you're in bear country, you're on a very secure outside. You might want to panel thicker plywood on the outside or put bear corners, that kind of thing. But ultimately, there's one way in and there's one way out. That leads me to a little bit of concern if you're going to be staying there full time or if you're going to have a fireplace in there. So you do want to make sure that you have at least one large window that is also an exit point opposite of your door. So in a couple of the designs I have here, there's a giant bay window on the backside of the property of the building, and that bay window doubles as an emergency exit. Let's talk a little bit about ventilation. When you have a small space like this, the humans in the space can create enough moisture that you'll end up with condensation. So you're going to have two key points of ventilation. You're going to have ventilation over your stove to ventilate externally, and you're going to have ventilation in your bathroom to ventilate externally. These vents go out the sidewalls. Okay, don't send them through the roof, through the sidewalls. Your roof is going to be the most contiguous structure in this whole thing. You want a good solid roof because when you have spray foam in the walls, if your roof leaks, it can get behind the spray foam, and you don't want that to happen. So you don't want to cut any holes in the roof. So again, your bathroom and your shower is going to have vents that vent. Your bathroom and shower area is going to vent outside. Kitchen is going to vent outside. Now you might have a kitchen that's only 4 feet wide. That's okay because you're going to have your pantry to store your food and your pots and pans. You're going to have your little kitchen area, and then you can eat outside. Okay, because the kitchen is near the door entrance. You take all your food outside and go enjoy the outdoors. The other place you can put a vent is if you have windows, you can put up a high window that you can open up to vent so you can retain some privacy, but you can vent out excess heat and you can vent out excess moisture. Or you can have an air exchanger. So you can bring in air low and push it out high. So for example, if it's very hot outside, you may want to have the hot air from your building vented outside. If it's very cold outside, you may want new fresh air to come in and then to go outside. Now in a 256 square foot space, you really don't need to have a wood stove. Okay, you can build this completely off grid if you want, and you can have like a propane stove, and you can have a little propane heater in there. But I wouldn't necessarily have a wood stove because then you've got to bring firewood in the house, and there's very little place to store it. And then if you're storing firewood outside, under the conditions in which you would need a wood stove, it would be cold outside. So you don't want to be opening and closing the door to bring in firewood. So just go with a electric heater. There's a lot of nice wall-mounted electric heaters. If you have the power, you go with a split unit, or you go with some kind of gas heater. It doesn't matter if you have gas heaters or you have electric heaters, you're going to want to have carbon monoxide sensors. And for even a small space like this, I'd put one in the kitchen and I'd put one in the living space. You're going to want to have smoke detectors, of course, one in the kitchen, one in the living space, and also some kind of moisture detection meters. Because if your humidity gets above 50%, you don't want to have mold. Especially if the unit is going to be stored over time, there's a lot of great vents that will come on if the moisture level gets too high. And so you can vent the space out. So again, you're just going to take a piece of graph paper. You're going to grid out your 12 by 20, whatever is, could be 16 by 16, whatever your 256 square feet is. And then you're going to put in these key components. You're going to put in a kitchen. Could be a 4-foot wide kitchen. It's okay. You're going to put in a pantry. Could be a 4-foot wide pantry. You're going to put in your shower. You're going to put in your entrance. You're going to put in your doorway. And you're going to think New York style apartment, you're going to think Tokyo style apartment. And you're just going to keep playing around with ideas on paper. Now, why do we do this on paper? Well, we do this on paper because we want to get a plan written up. Now, you can have lofts in it. You could have, extra storage. But again, you can use that shipping container for storage outside. They're pretty secure. They're stable. You can put them on pillars or put them on railroad ties, gravel underneath them so they get good airflow. A container will last a long time. So you can put your tools stored out there, lock them up really good. This cabin is primary living space. And if it's, let's say it's got a 12 by 12 main room, because you're not going to produce bedrooms in here, that's good enough to put bunk beds for 4 full-grown adults. Now, again, do you want? It's a living space. It's a sleeping space. It's not where you're going to hang out full time. You're going to have a front porch on something like this. The front porch is detachable from the building, so you can have an 8-foot wide porch if you want. You could wrap around porch with this because your primary living space is outside. This is your secure shelter for a heavy storm. It is where you might be doing some cooking in the winter. It's where you're going to be able to wash up and get clean to sleep. So it's kind of like a sleeping nook. And it's ultimately meant for just a few people. Now, again, it's going to give you the flexibility to start using your land today rather than waiting for the future. It's going to give you a secure location. Let's say you got a piece of land that you're doing hunting on, that you can stay for hunting. With the technology that's available today, it can be secure for your winter camp as well. So you bring out a couple propane tanks. You've got either a battery bank on site or you've got some kind of farm power coming to the unit, and you are ready to go. In some cases, because of the tiny square footage, you can run it on a generator just fine. The key here is we're going for minimalism. We're going for focus. We're going for functionality over looks. So you could put plywood walls on the inside if you want. It really depends on whether what you're using this for. Now, if you've got a hunting cabin like this and it's out there on a piece of property, the great thing about this particular thing is that you can secure the cabin. So if you've got bears in your area, you can of course remove all the food, remove all the soaps, anything with scents, and basically lock the door, bar the windows, and leave it for the season. And because you can have low voltage like 12-volt fans and stuff like that, you can still have the unit venting itself. You can also make the units a little bit more secure because not only do you want to be airtight, but you want to be critter tight as well. So even under the space where you've got because underneath you only have drain pipes and all of your internal water piping and everything is on the inside, you can have one little area where you just open the drain up and drain all the pipes. And so it's a similar design to an RV where you can do that. But once your space is drained, everything can be sealed off. You can disconnect the gray water pipe and seal it. You can essentially winterize this particular cabin. Now, I've got hundreds of diagrams and drawings, and I was thinking about putting them into a book. What I found when drawing these up and working with people who are designing such a space is that really have fun with it on paper. Get out that graph paper, draw up 15 different bathroom designs. This particular bathroom I have on one of these diagrams is 8 foot by 4 foot. And that offsets the door a little bit. And that's a big bathroom. That's a lot of bathroom space. But again, if you have your hot water heater in there, if you have your pantry storage or your sanitation storage in the bathroom, then that space is still it's comfortable. I have another bathroom design here that's 4 foot by 6 foot. I have another bathroom design here that is a toilet on one side, and then the kitchen is the you have to take the toilet out of the bathroom space to use the shower, because when you step out of the shower, you're stepping into the space where the toilet was. So you're going to find some of these little challenges. You can even cut out little graph paper and then start laying these out. Have fun with it. Get your family involved. plan it out on paper, and before you know it, you'll be on your land, enjoying it on the weekend, comfortable. It's a step up from pulling in a travel trailer if you have winter or seasonal camping. But again, if you start pricing this out and realize that one of these tiny houses might cost you $25,000 or $30,000, then you can just say, well, I'm going to get a pop-up or I'm just going to get a regular trailer. You really haven't spent any money. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead, and this has been a supplement to our 256 square foot tiny house design, and we talk specifically about just key components, how to lay out the design, functionality, transitional spaces, those elements that are going to make this easy and enjoyable. And once they drop the shell, you often can get this done in a weekend if you're doing it yourself. If you're hiring a contractor to do it, it won't cost you a whole lot, because I know a lot of you folks have property in a different state, so you kind of want to get everything dropped and set up and ready to go. And it gives you a way to get pricing together. And if you realize the price is too high, you can easily substitute a RV or a container office or something that's prefabricated. But again, this is way more space than you're going to get in a container because we're able to work with wider spaces. Plus, the tiny house has market value after you're done with it. You can sell it. Just put it on a trailer and take it somewhere. Again, though, it's not on a trailer because of the weight. This space will have a weight. Anyway, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. This has been our podcast. Thanks for listening. If you have questions, visit us at www.prosperityhomestead.org. And while I'm getting these things together, I have put together a PDF file of a lot of my designs in a kind of a draft manuscript, because we are thinking about producing a book on this, but I'll be happy to give that to you for free when you visit www.prosperityhomestead.org. Go to the contact page and ask your questions about that transitional tiny house, that small cabin that's going to get you started on your land today. I'll see you in the next podcast. Again, I've been Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead.